The human body can do lots of cool things, but not everyone can Gleek. If you've come equipped with any of these extra bells and whistles, consider yourself special. One could make the case that there is absolutely no benefit to being able to wiggle one's ears. One could make an equally strong case that this is malarkey, because somebody making a funny face while wiggling their ears is objectively hilarious.
Watch.
In any event, this appears to be an ability that is purely vestigial, left over from the common ancestor of humans and primates, both of which can still do the wiggle. The rub? According to a study titled Evidence for a Vestigial Pinna Orienting System in Humans, it doesn't seem like ear wiggling served any purpose in those ancestors either, with of course the possible exception of hilarity. Whether this ability is purely genetic or can be learned is somewhat unclear. Dr. Kristen Woodward, an anesthesiologist who has independently researched quirky body phenomena, and who is probably a huge hit at parties, told Glamour, the ability to wiggle the ears may be inherited, however it can also be learned with practice. It is thought that about 10 to 20% of the population has the ability, so if you can't wiggle your ears but want to learn, just spend a little while every day trying really hard.
If I can wiggle my ears...
Even if you fail, it'll probably look just as hilarious as if you had succeeded. The ability to bend your thumb way back is commonly referred to as hitchhiker's thumb, although frequently hitching rides will not make your thumb any more bendy. The trait has been the subject of multiple scientific studies. One, published in 2012 under the impressively scholarly title The Prevalence and Comparison of Bent Little Finger and Hitchhiker's Thumb in South Nigeria, found that it may be present in about 1/3 of the population. This, however, may be a slight oversimplification, since it's also been suggested that thumbs fall into more categories than simply regular and extra bendy.
Oh, I'm weird. Look, this finger is too short.
That's your thumb.
Is it? Then what's this?
Oh my god, I don't know.
In a series of papers titled Myths of Human Genetics by University of Delaware professor John H. McDonald, the notion that thumb type is binary was picked apart. The author pointed out glaring inconsistencies in the use of arbitrary criteria in previous studies, concluding that most individuals have intermediate values, not the two distinct kinds of thumbs described in the myth. One could be forgiven for reaching their own conclusion, that Professor McDonald had a great deal of time on his hands, and also two thumbs of decidedly medium bendiness. Here's where things get a little bit wince-inducing. Remember in the 1987 action comedy classic Lethal Weapon how Mel Gibson's character could pop his arm right out of socket at will? Then he could pop it back in by dramatically and painfully slamming it up against the wall? Well, it turns out that some people can actually do that, and while it can certainly be painful, it's nowhere near as badass and dramatic. According to Raleigh Hand to Shoulder Center, these people suffer from a condition succinctly referred to as shoulder instability, and some of them, who are just as succinctly called loose-jointed, can easily pop their shoulders in and out of their sockets with little or no pain at all.
Party trick, yeah, okay. That's kind of it.
It's unclear what percentage of the population are able to do this, and while the ability is often associated with trauma to the ligaments or muscles surrounding the shoulder sockets, this isn't always true. In 2012, a paper titled Voluntary Anterior Dislocation of the Shoulder in a 10-year-old Child Treated Surgically describes such a case. The patient was able to pop their right arm in and out of socket at will with no pain, despite there being no history of injury to the area. The condition was rectified by way of surgery, so if you're able to do this, you can treat it that way. Or you can just keep doing your party trick and freaking out your friends. We all know that the majority of people are right-handed, with a smaller minority being left-handed folks who are usually thought to be more weird and creative, although that's a misconception. Studies, such as one from 2020 titled Genome-Wide Association Study Identifies 48 Common Genetic Variants Associated with Handedness, have, as the title indicates, identified a strong genetic component associated with one's preference for one hand over the other, although it's not clear what, if any, purpose this preference serves. One interesting finding of the study, though, has to do with those odd outliers, ambidextrous people who are neither left nor right-handed, but equally adept at using both.
It's nice of you to pretend not to notice. The popcorn? I'm holding it in two equally strong hands. Go ahead, say it. Look at Kevin, the ambidextrous freak.
According to ZME Science, about 90% of the general population is right-handed, about 10% are left-handed, and a sliver, less than 1%, are ambidextrous. This raises an interesting question. Some other studies, such as a 2009 examination titled Genetic Influences on Handedness, have concluded that genetics are only about 25% responsible for your dominant hand preference, with the rest chalked up to upbringing and environmental factors. If this is true, however, it makes the mere existence of ambidextrous people a mystery. And as for that minute fraction of the population that is capable of writing with both hands simultaneously, well, they may just be from another universe. You probably at some point encountered some wiseacre who says, "Hey, I can stick out my tongue and touch my nose." They then proceed to stick out their tongue while touching their finger to the tip of their nose, then guffaw like they just totally pulled one over on you. Everyone knows that virtually nobody not named Gene Simmons can stick out their tongue that far, except that this isn't the case. In fact, roughly 10% of the general population can perform the maneuver known as Gorlin sign, much more than one might think. And if you happen to be afflicted with a condition known as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or EDS, chances are that it's easy. According to the National Library of Medicine, EDS is a genetic condition that affects the body's production of collagen, as well as the properties of that vital protein.
I don't produce a whole lot of collagen, so I have extra skin, like, everywhere.
The condition is characterized by a general, rubberiness of the joints, organs, and skin. Severe cases can cause serious problems, ranging from fatigue and chronic pain to the wanton rupturing of arteries and organs. The ability to touch your tongue to your nose is sometimes indicative of the presence of this disorder, but usually it just means that you're the lucky 1 in 10 who can win bar bets for the rest of your life. Sneezing is one of those bodily functions that most people have a love-hate relationship with. Sure, a good sneeze can feel satisfying, except when it's immediately followed by another one, and another, and another. Also, it seems that they sometimes come along at pretty inopportune moments, like when you're changing lanes in traffic, for example, or when you're about to field a fly ball. This is annoying because, as you might have noticed, it's virtually impossible to sneeze without closing your eyes, and yet it can be done.
Don't close your eyes. It's impossible to sneeze if your eyes are open. Open your eyes.
Nobody is exactly sure what the evolutionary purpose is behind your eyelids automatically slamming shut when you sneeze. But according to allergist Dr. Purvi Parikh, sneezing and the accompanying eye closure is what's known as an autonomic reflex. Other things that fall into this category include swallowing and breathing. In other words, these are bodily functions which are very difficult to override. Speaking with Well and Good, Dr. Parikh explained that, with practice, one can learn to keep their eyes open while sneezing. It's just really tough to do. If you're prone to allergy attacks and find yourself in heavy traffic often, though, it may not be a bad idea to give it a shot. The ability to fold your tongue lengthwise, while not universal, is a fairly common trait. As described by John H. MacDonald in his Myths of Human Genetics series, this ability has been used in classes as sort of a basic introduction to genetics. But, says Dr. MacDonald, this is a fallacy. While the trait may have a genetic component, the prevalence of rolling children born to non-rolling parents and vice versa suggests that it's a bit more complicated than whether or not one has a tongue-rolling gene. Also, upwards of 2/3 of the population can do it, and it's relatively easy to learn. There are, however, weird tongue maneuvers that are quite a bit less common, according to a 2020 study titled 5 Specific Tongue Movements in a Healthy Population conducted in the Netherlands. It was found that, while 83% of the study's participants could fold their tongue lengthwise, far fewer could fold it widthwise, about 27%, twist it to the left or right, about 35%, or make that cloverleaf shape with it like your really weird buddy Dave, roughly 15%. When it came to the physiological reasons behind these abilities, though, the study drew a big old blank. There are people who, upon scrunching the muscles of their face a certain way, produce a dull roaring sound in their ears. It should be noted that the sound can be heard only by them, not by everyone, because that would definitely be totally weird. In 2020, a tweet by science guy Massimo describing this effect went stupidly viral, with the comments largely falling into two camps along the lines of either "I had no idea" or "I thought everybody could do this." Those that can, it turns out, have the unique ability to voluntarily contract a set of muscles that others cannot, the tensor tympani muscle, the largest muscle residing in the middle ear. A 2013 paper titled Voluntary Contraction of the Tensor Tympani Muscle and Its Audiometric Effects noted that despite its size and prominence, the exact function of this muscle is unknown, although it does appear to dampen the totally gross sounds of chewing when you're eating. The subject described in the paper reported a form of tinnitus, only instead of ringing, he would hear roaring in his ears when flexing the muscles of his mug a certain way. Upon examination, it was found that he was able to voluntarily contract both tensor tympani muscles at once, resulting in the loss of lower frequencies while doing so. The paper doesn't state whether the doctor simply told him to stop screwing up his face like that, but it's fun to imagine this to be the case. If you don't know what gleeking is, then congratulations on skipping middle school. For those of you who did attend, you'll recall that one weird kid who had perfected the skill of seemingly effortlessly firing tiny balls of spit out of his mouth, landing them with alarming accuracy wherever he pleased, which was usually around the vicinity of your eye. You never knew what to call it until you heard another kid protest, "Stop gleeking on me or I'll tell." But he never told, and the weird kid kept gleeking away at him, you, and everyone else. This ability is, believe it or not, one that can be learned. There are, you see, glands called sublingual glands on the underside of your tongue that produce saliva, which builds up in there in tiny amounts. If you learn to contract the muscles around this gland, and anyone can with enough practice, then you too can Gleek. Dentist Mark S. Wolf gave a few helpful tips to health. First, try eating something sour, which helps build up the saliva. Stick out your tongue and lift it, then curl the tip behind your front teeth. Then tense your tongue muscles and voila! Gleek City.